मोदी, ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा।
मैं अमित अनिल चंद्र शाह,
I, नितिन जयराम गडकरी,
I, देवी सदानंद गौड़ा,
I, निर्मला सीतारामन,
मैं रामविलास पासवान,
I, सुब्रमण्यम जयशंकर,
मैं स्मृति जुबिन ईरानी,
मैं डॉक्टर हर्षवर्धन।
Welcome to this very special edition of the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and we're speaking today on a day when the Modi government, that was given a huge mandate to run the country for another 5 years, has now revealed who the A team will be. And this is a team that will have the task to fulfill huge expectations. The new Council of Ministers has been an interesting mix of old faces, quite a few repeats from Modi 1.0 and some fresh faces. Regional representations have been kept in mind and allies have been accommodated, though the Janata Dal United did surprise by opting out of the government pretty much at the last minute. To analyze Modi's top team this evening, I am joined now by Swaminathan Iyer, consulting editor at ET Now, R. Jagannathan, editorial director, Swaraj Magazine, Sadanand Dhume, resident fellow, American Enterprise Institute, Mohammad Ayub, professor emeritus of international relations at Michigan State University, Yamini Iyer, president and chief executive at Center for Policy Research, Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador to Canada and South Korea. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Let me begin by speaking with Swaminathan Iyer. Few surprises here. Amit Shah, whether he will be in government or continue to run the party, was not very clear till earlier this evening. He is clearly in government. S. Jayashankar, another big surprise. What were the ones that stood out for you, Swami?
Well, frankly, these were the two that stood out. A whole lot of the others didn't matter. Mr. Modi, I expect, would once again run a pretty centralized government. It was said in the last thing that, most ministries had to keep referring their proposals to the PMO for clearance. Would that kind of thing continue? I think it will continue. It will continue to be a ship run very tightly by the captain. Mr. Amit Shah, I think, is an important person because the Prime Minister trusts him and has full faith in his abilities in a way which is not evident with regard to other ministers. It remains to be seen what he occupies. Some says that, Home Ministry would be a natural for him. If on the other hand, Rajnath is going to continue, he could be Finance Minister. He does not have the technocratic expertise. But who says that you really do need technocratic expertise? After all, Mr. Arun Jaitley was not a finance man, he was a lawyer. Before that, Mr. Chidambaram, he was a lawyer. Jaswant Singh was a lawyer. So you don't really need to be a technocrat. So Mr. Amit Shah in finance, it could fit in. However, there remains the chance that maybe Mr. Gadkari comes as finance minister. That would be a big change. That would be a signal for a dynamic finance ministry which would go further ahead. Mr. Jayashankar is an interesting thing. Would he become external affairs minister? Well, Sushma Swaraj has opted out, so it's obviously possible. It's also possible, I think, that he might be brought in on commerce. We have a situation right now where there are two very important negotiations, one with the United States and one in the RCEP, the free trade area, the Asian free trade area, where you need to have a balance between we want to be in there, but we're also terrified that we'll be swamped by Chinese imports from there. So how do you strike that balance? So with these two, with Mr. Trump, of course, there has been a running war. There's been one issue after another after another. India has lost its access under the generalized scheme of preferences But if we have an intelligent negotiation, we may be able to get that back. So I think, would Jaishankar be the suitable man to handle these two things, the negotiations with Trump and the negotiations with RCEP? I think he would be a good choice for that.
Let me come to Professor Mohammad Ayub on your, initial reactions from the Council of Ministers. It's by no feat of the imagination a lean government, but there seems to be an attempt to give representation to all, to even reward state unit leaders who have done well. To keep in mind states like Kerala and West Bengal, where the BJP has more ground to cover. What were your key observations?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. It also demonstrates the expansionist ideas that the BJP leaders harbor, that states where they have, well, in West Bengal they did relatively well compared to earlier times. In Kerala they didn't, but they are, and of course in Tamil Nadu they didn't, but they are trying to make inroads into those states. So obviously giving them higher representation. And Karnataka, where they did very well, it's very clear that the South and the East are going to be the next two basic areas where they're going to focus in terms of expanding their footprint. What impressed me most about I don't know whether I should call it impressed me, but what I noticed most about this, the swearing-in ceremony today, was how much of a spectacle it was. It almost seemed like it was a presidential inauguration, rather than a cabinet swearing in a parliamentary democracy. In earlier times, it used to be a very staid affair, but this time it was there was a mammoth gathering, and the way people arrived and were seated and so on and so forth gave me this feeling that it's a very presidential sort of event, and in a way it was appropriate because the elections themselves had been turned into a presidential contest, with Mr. Modi being the BJP's candidate and no one really being in the opposition candidate. So, and that was one of the reasons why the BJP did so well, was that it was able to successfully turn it into a presidential form of contest without any particular opponent taking on Mr. Modi. That was one thing. The other thing that I wanted to point out was Swaminathan Iyer talked about Jaishankar. I've known Jaishankar for the last 45 years or so when he was a student at Nehru University at JNU, and in the mid-70s when I was on the faculty of JNU. And I had always been very impressed by his intellectual capabilities even at that very young age. And I think he would make an excellent foreign minister. His experience in East Asia, in Singapore and China and so on, and in Japan, would stand him in good stead in terms of India's Look East policy in building relations or accelerating them with the East Asian countries, particularly with Japan and of course with Australia. But also he has had experience as ambassador to the United States and as a very successful foreign secretary. And he was instrumental in part in getting the India-US civil nuclear deal going. So he has a wealth of experience, which I think will, again, as I said earlier, stand him in a very good stead. He was a very brilliant student. His entry into the IFS was, I think, a boon for the country, and he will carry over that experience if he's appointed.
We're talking about S. Jaishankar, and he has been...
that he will be, because there was no other reason.
Yes, since we've been speaking about S. Jaishankar and the sort of heft he brings to foreign policy, though there is no guarantee that that is the portfolio he'll be handling. Let me get Vishnu Prakash in for your commentary on two things. One is that we know Sushma Swaraj is not in this cabinet. We know the External Affairs Ministry needs to be allocated. We know there is a career diplomat now in that Council of Ministers. Not necessary that he will be fit into there. But what are the challenges on that front, and what do you think is the role S. Jaishankar can play in this government?
Well, the challenges are twofold. One is to neutralize the negative, and the second is to build on the positives. And when we talk of the negatives, it is our western neighbor mostly, and also our northern neighbor, which need to be which we need to focus on, because as far as Pakistan is concerned, we have we all know that we have been at the receiving end of the machinations, the terror infrastructure, and it's a long battle. We need to fight that. China will always be and is an adversary, and we have to handle it very differently. The Wuhan spirit helped to lower the temperatures, but now we need the follow-up, which should happen sooner than later. So these are one set of issues, but then when it comes to building on the synergies and positives, I mean, they are huge positives, and the last 5 years of the Modi-led government have yielded us dividends. I am very impressed, for example, at the kind of inroads, entrees that have been made with the Gulf countries, with how we have engaged Saudi Arabia and UAE. Japan is a case by itself. It has been a steadfast partner. US is both, at the moment there are some niggling issues, but we have, it is a natural partner. And I mean, these are some of the relationships. France, for example, we don't talk much of France, but let's recall that when India went nuclear in '98, one of the P5 countries which first started to engage India was France. So, and our traditional friend Russia. So these are some of the countries. I don't want to in any ways say that the other countries are not important. Neighborhood has always been important, and successive leaders have focused on the neighborhood. So in short, the task is cut out for us, because this is a very important period when India will be looking at becoming a $5 trillion economy, and the foreign policy is nothing but an extension of the domestic policy.
Mr. Prakash, while we're speaking,
I for one
while we're speaking, the pictures of the Prime Minister with all the representatives of BIMSTEC nations that have attended. A quick word from you on the significance of that, the special invitees from the BIMSTEC nations.
Neighborhood, 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 and if we get, it's a truism that any country has to get its neighborhood right, the Neighborhood Act right, to claim its rightful place in the sun, in the Committee of Nations. And it is not news. Always India is focused on the neighborhood, and we have also been doing that. There has been a sharper focus, I would say, that under Modi-led government. We all know how he made Bhutan the first port of call. This time it's likely to be Maldives. And certainly both SAARC as well as BIMSTEC are key to our neighborhood policy. SAARC is being held hostage by our western neighbor, and since the Uri attack, it is very clear that the leadership of the day in India has decided that enough is enough, and we are not letting Pakistan veto initiatives and to hold us back. And the beauty of BIMSTEC is that 4 of the or 5 of the 7 countries are SAARC nations. Plus there is Myanmar, with which we have a land border, we have security interests, Thailand. So I'm very happy, Tamanna, that we are looking at BIMSTEC so closely. My only hope is that we sustain that interest, because the score sheet of BIMSTEC cooperation has been a little underwhelming, and it's about time that we all nations walk the talk. But this is a huge step forward, and it speaks volume of the standing of India and the stature of the Prime Minister, that our guests have so readily accepted India's invitation just 4 days in advance, and are here to witness this big moment in India's history.
News coming in. So, of all the people who were sworn in today, 24 will be ministers with cabinet rank. So, cabinet ministers. These include Dr. S. Jaishankar, who, of course, will be joining government as a minister for the first time. Arvind Sawant of the Shiv Sena as well. Perhaps some tough backroom bargaining there, but he has made it as well, his first stint as minister. There are 9 ministers of state with independent charge. And then, of course, in the MOS category, there are 24. So we have some idea of, how this government will look and how it's taking shape. Let me get an R. Jagannathan on what is the messaging that has come from the Council of Ministers and those who have been sworn in this evening, because we know that the Modi government does go strong on messaging, and maybe some of that will come in from the allocation of portfolios. But what is the larger message at play here?
One thing, I think Mr. Modi prefers incremental and small changes rather than big bang changes. So he is basically signaling that it will be more of the same. In fact, the 2 big changes that have happened almost by accident, where Mr. Jaitley and Sushma Swaraj, probably due to health reasons, had to opt out. And that is what is causing the big change in the top 5 pecking order in the this ministry. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, by bringing in Amit Shah into the ministry, there is going to be a huge change in the power structure, pecking order, power shift within the cabinet and in the party. The reason is, before he came into the picture, the only power structure, only power pole was Mr. Modi. Now actually you have a party president who of course may shed his party president's job, but who has a power both in the party base and in the ministry. And if he is given the crucial portfolio of finance, you're going to get a huge amount of change in terms of, so we are talking about actually, though Mr. Modi obviously dominates, but there is a new power center that has come into the cabinet, and I think we cannot ignore that fact. So I would expect that he would probably go not for home but finance, and Mr. Modi will probably not deny him that if he had asked for it. So we are probably seeing him as a finance minister, and I would expect a lot of fireworks in the next budget. And don't forget that compared to, say, the previous incumbent, he probably has a better claim to the finance ministry than Mr. Jaitley, for a simple reason. He has had more hands-on experience in actually running something than anybody else. I mean, he's run a cooperative bank, failing cooperative bank in Ahmedabad, the biggest in the country, and turned it around from losses to profit. So he understands business in some way. And remember, it is the banking sector in India that needs fixing. And if he has turned around a decrepit cooperative bank into something better, I would suspect that he understands the banking business quite much better than what I would expect Jaitley to have understood. So I think we are going to see some big changes. The third thing I would like to say before this thing is that Mr. Modi, if at all he makes lateral inductions from outside the political sphere of elected MPs and regions and things like that, seems to prefer people from the bureaucracy. So to Hardeep Puri and R.K. Singh, you now have S. Jaishankar. So he obviously trusts people who have actually done something in the bureaucracy to take over as ministers. So these are the kind of lateral inductions he seems to prefer. He did not bring anybody, say, from outside industry or in any of the ministries, whereas he could have, because with the kind of majority he has in the party and in the NDA, he could have brought anybody. He could have had a wow cabinet with people who are very well established in industry and business, but he didn't do that. He has brought all the lateral inductions from the bureaucracy. So that's the 3 important points I'd like to make on this.
Good point, Jaggi, because to be fair, he could have done that in term 1 as well, but he was very clear right from the start that the position of ministers they are political representatives at the end of the day. Sadanand Dume, you want to come in on that, the key messaging, especially in what has been given to alliance partners, the JDU at the last minute saying that, hey, we're not interested. Some reports that they wanted more ministries, but they did not get what they wanted. Not that alliance partners really have much of a bargaining chip.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, I mean, I'd be echoing some of the comments that some of the other panelists have made. A few things. I mean, the first is that, to me, this cabinet has 3 interesting omissions and 2 interesting additions. The 3 interesting omissions are, in addition to Arun Jaitley and Sushma Swaraj, Suresh Prabhu losing his position. And I think that's quite important given the state of India's crucial trade talks, as Swami had pointed out, and the fact that there was really in NDA one, or rather in Modi one, there was really no coherent trade policy. So it'll be interesting to see if there's some more clarity now developing. I suppose. In terms of what is happening in terms of Amit Shah and Jaishankar, I would agree with Jaggi. My own bet, we're all speculating over here, but my own bet is that Amit Shah is much more likely to get finance than he is likely to get home. I would not be as fast in sort of signing off on the great achievements he's going to have as finance minister. Frankly, we don't know, because we saw that as the BJP president, Amit Shah was a fierce champion of some of these, micro welfare schemes, gas cylinders, toilets, and all. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But we saw relatively little large-scale economic reform in India one. And I'm keeping an open mind, but it'll be very interesting to see if Amit Shah is finance minister, whether he sort of doubles down on that very sort of incremental, what Arvind Subramanian called creative incrementalism, or decides that finally now in NDA 2, it's time to go in for sweeping economic reform. That's the thing that's the part we don't know. And my third and sort of final point is that I agree with the Jaggi that I'm sorry, using his Twitter handle. I agree with Jaggi that the character of the government does fundamentally change with the induction of Amit Shah. This is no longer going to be a government with just one pole. You have a prime minister, you have someone who is clearly acknowledged as the number 2 figure in the party now in government. And I would add to that if Dr. Jaishankar is given external affairs, which is a possibility, then you would also be seeing an empowered foreign minister who is extremely well versed in international affairs. Yes. And if you take all of it together, that would actually change the character and change the nature of the government compared to Modi 1.0.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you had to, top 3 guesses, what does Amit Shah get, and who gets finance? Smriti Irani want to watch out for, and Nitin Gadkari as well. Let me take just one quick political comment from Tejas Mehta on that. And the fact that this big entry into the Council of Ministers, and looking at the kind of huge role that Amit Shah has played in the mind space and within the BJP, his proximity to the Prime Minister, that changes everything, especially for, say, a Rajnath Singh, a Nitin Gadkari, Ravi Shankar Prasad.
Well, definitely, he is somebody who has come from Gujarat, been a minister there, but then came to Gujarat, joined. Became the president, and then was heading first he was heading the entire campaign of 2014 and then became the president. Rajnath Singh is a much senior, functionary and member of the BJP, been with Mr. Vajpayee. So is the case for Ravi Shankar Prasad. But I think as far as the others are concerned, they would acknowledge that Amit Shah's role has been absolutely phenomenal as far as the BJP is concerned. He has totally changed the narrative of what is it to be a president of any party. I mean, look at him, be it Uttar Pradesh or any other state, he goes and sits there for 6 months and he works on the ground with other workers. He has his ear completely to the ground, and that is how you can win, 73 out of 80 seats, or this time, 62 out of 80 seats. Otherwise, it's just not possible. I mean, take a direct look at how Rahul Gandhi, for example, as a president was functioning. Completely different. So, I mean, this is something which has been appreciated by the party, by other members, and therefore I think this leg up has come in. Moreover, yes, I do agree with many other panelists that this Jodi, Jugalbandi of Narendra Modi and of Amit Shah goes back many years and know each other since since he was in his college days. Narendra Modi knows him and he has been in the ministry with him. So I think this talmel would continue now in the government. At the government level, of course, the big question is who fills in his shoes. It will be difficult for anybody. JP Nadda's name is the name which is being propositioned because yes, JP Nadda's name has not been is not been sworn in today. So it could be that he is the one who takes over. But remember the 300 par, as we were discussing earlier, Tamanna, 300 par was the call of action for next to bring it to 333, as some are really wanting the party to bring it. Sunil Devdar who has been heading the BJP's movement on the ground, he's been saying 333 next time. They'll have to expand in West Bengal, in the northeast more, in Orissa, and in the south somewhere. And if that's somebody, they need to find somebody who really do that for the BJP. That will be an extremely tough choice for the party, given the fact that Amit has done extremely well for the party.
Yeah, so no, of course, that is going to be a tough choice, but one assumes this is a well-oiled machinery. Yamini, apologies for coming to you so late in the show, but I have, a very specific point of view to get from you on what are the challenges for this new government and the Council of Ministers, and what are the top 3 portfolios that you think is completely imperative. And let's be frank, till this afternoon, people weren't so sure about Amit Shah as finance minister. It's seeming more likely now. Do you think it's a choice, if it is in that sense, be acceptable and something which is pleasing to all, the investor community, the markets, etc.?
I think, first of all, one of the most interesting things about this cabinet, as has been said before, is that we are now going to see a government that was run entirely through one power center, run through 2 power centers. And that's going to make a very, very big difference to the way in which the Modi 2.0 is going to operate. And a lot of it will depend on how Amit Shah himself sort of builds confidence. He's clearly built confidence in terms of his political acumen and as being an ace organizer, and his ability to have really spearheaded so many of the big victories of the BJP in the last 5 years, and particularly this last victory. But his ability as an administrator, I think, is now going to be the big point of test. If he does get finance, there's absolutely no question that there are huge challenges that the Ministry of Finance is going to have to deal with. I think a lot of it is going to depend on his ability to actually engage effectively with technocrats and experts and be able to then create a budget that addresses many of the challenges that the Indian economy is facing. There are deep structural challenges. I think one of the biggest issues that this government is going to have to confront first and foremost is agriculture. And I think that they should have a really strong, one of their biggest political heavyweights in the agricultural ministry. It's going to matter to them quite significantly, I think, even politically over the next few months as they head into the next round of elections. And even though the agricultural crisis didn't necessarily show up in terms of voting, the fact is you can't deny that India's agriculture is going through a deep crisis. It links up to the bigger crises of jobs that also needs to be addressed. And so I would like to see a strong agricultural minister and an agricultural minister that's a political heavyweight, that's going to be able to address some of the big ticket reforms that require a lot of negotiation between center and state.
Okay, Yamini, let me follow up by asking you what the top priorities should be for the new finance minister, whoever it is.
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to address agriculture. At this point in time, the only resolution that the government had in the interim budget to the agricultural crisis was through a cash stimulus through something like PM Kisan. By all accounts, this is going to be both enhanced and potentially universalized. That would mean that that has to be backed up with some significant structural reforms around the MSP, around procurement processes, around markets. There has been some attempt with ENAM to try and create an electronic marketing system. There's enough information that the government has today in terms of the many problems with that and the movement towards, and these need to be addressed, and we need to move towards a more significant common agricultural market. Secondly, we need to be able to boost investment. We need to fix the banking crises. That's going to be a significant issue. As far as jobs are concerned, I think this is a deeper, much more structural problem. The first thing that needs to be done, I think, is for the government to strengthen once again credibility of its own statistical and data systems, so that people at large, and particularly policymakers, are going to be in a stronger position to recognize the nature of the problem and then think through solutions. So I would, right now, we are done with the election. elections, put the NSSO data out into the public domain so that we can finally have a meaningful debate on the extent of the jobs crisis and a debate on what needs to be done to move forward and address that. I would also look at a much more integrated approach towards skilling and human resource development. India is probably the only country in the world where a significant proportion of its school-going population that finishes 8 years of schooling can barely read a standard 2 text. And we are trying to skill our population and make them more employable in the labor market. These two ministries need to be merged, and these two conversations need to start happening collectively. We need to be addressing the challenge of skilling at the point of elementary and secondary education, and start looking at curricular reform in a much more proactive and sensible way, so that the challenge of skilling is less impossible to address, but also is addressed much more in terms of how one can skill aligned to what the labor market, what the job market needs are.
No, skill development is
So
definitely a tough gig
that I would look at.
Skill development is definitely a tough gig. In 1.0, Rajiv Pratap Rudy was handling skill development, but was sort of shunted out in the reshuffle. So it's definitely going to be a tough one. So agriculture, skill development, who are these mantris we need to keep a watch out for. I'm going to take a very short break and come right back. We have a lot more to discuss as we dissect Modi's A-team. Don't go away. "58 in all have taken oath, including the Prime Minister." 58 is the size of the Council of Ministers. Some new names, some old ones have been retained, and a couple of surprises. The biggest one among them, of course, being Amit Shah, the all-powerful BJP president, now inducted into government. We're having a conversation here about what this composition means for the structure of the new Modi government. Sadanand Dume, in Modi 1.0, there was this constant ruing about a lack of bench strength. There was a time when Arun Jaitley had to take care of defense as well as finance for quite some time. There were a lot of new faces. Many of them have now been repeated. Are we going to see a little more assertion of these individual ministers this time round, even though the mandate is even bigger and more directly credited to Prime Minister Modi?
It's a good question, Tamanna. I mean, I think, one of the things about bench strength is that, in a way, the bench strength automatically gets better simply by virtue of the fact that many of these ministers were greenhorns 5 years ago, and now they have a lot more experience. They've been running their ministries and so on. So I would take someone like Dharmendra Pradhan. Now he's a seasoned minister. Take someone like Piyush Goyal. So I think that they're, just purely in terms of experience, which was something that the BJP in particular lacked when it took power in 2014, because it had been out of office for 10 years, and many of the stalwarts of the Vajpayee era had either sort of aged out or fallen out with Mr. Modi. So they didn't have that. And I think so. So today they're somewhat better placed. It's good to see that the Prime Minister is reaching out to some outside talent, such as Dr. Jaishankar. It would be nice if he did a little bit more of that, because frankly, he has a mandate that is, for all intents and purposes, presidential. So he can pick his own people. My own sense is that over time, just the pressures of governance are going to force the government to become more professional in a couple of areas. External affairs, of course, where I think that for all of Sushma Swaraj's charms as a Twitter helpline, she really wasn't hacking it as a successful foreign minister. So I think this sort of, hopefully we'll see more professionalization over there. The big question remains finance, where again, you would hope that the Prime Minister would have sort of picked someone who has heft, but it's okay to go with someone who has political heft, as long as then, let's presume it's Amit Shah, then is able to turn to technocrats, turn to people who have the right expertise, and channel that towards the economy.
What about the ones that have been left out? We've spoken about the ones which have been repeated, but let me come to Professor Ayub with this. Radha Mohan Singh, Menaka Gandhi, JP Nadda, though some are speculating that's because he will take over, on the party. Suresh Prabhu, some prominent names that were left out as well.
Yeah, I think those who were left out, amongst those, I mean, Anand Kumar Hegde and a couple of others were left out because of the way they were shooting their mouth off. I don't know much about the others, but I think it was good on the part of the Prime Minister to do that, to have more sober people inducted into the cabinet. But I have a sense of unease about a couple of things that I wanted to point out before we end the discussion. One is, this election was won not so much by the party but by a single individual. When you ask people on the streets, they said they voted for Modi. And one of the main reasons why they voted for Prime Minister Modi was that he was able to make it into as I said, a presidential form of race, but also because of the populism, the rhetoric that he engaged in. And I have a sense of unease that populism can, as many observers feel, can be the first step towards authoritarianism. And Mr. Modi also has an authoritarian streak, the way he ran the first cabinet when all the major decisions were concentrated in his person. That, I think, in this case, maybe with Amit Shah being a strong personality, may be modified to some extent, but I'm not so sure how far it'll go. And you can run and even win an election on steroids, but you cannot run the country for 5 years on the basis of emotional hype. And I think that would have to be toned down. The second thing is, I'm glad that the Prime Minister made the statement after the elections that he was going to also engage, or whatever the word was, sabka vishwas, that he was going to take everybody along. Because there is certainly a sense of unease amongst the minorities, particularly the Muslims, about the composition of the government and the way many of their senior leaders in the party, like Yogi Adityanath or Giriraj Singh and so on, making very openly statements that could be interpreted as being anti-Muslim. And the Prime Minister did make the point that he was going to be the Prime Minister of all the people of India, not just those who voted for him, but he was going to take care of those who didn't vote for him either. But now I think he'll have to walk the talk. He'll have to put his money where his mouth is. And one of the ways it could be done is, there is a paucity of Muslim personnel in the government and in the party. That's a reflection of the way the party is composed. But now with the BJP about to elect many more members to the Rajya Sabha, that a concerted effort should be made on his part and on the part of the leadership to induct more Muslim MPs, at least in the Rajya Sabha, which would give a sense of reassurance to the minorities.
Okay, Jaggi, you want to respond to the 2 points Professor Ayub made, and especially about running a government on steroids. Though, as we've seen from term one, Narendra Modi in election mode and Narendra Modi in governance is not necessarily the same person or the same pace.
Actually, we have had a fairly cohesive government in the first term, and the government was run on steroids, not in the sense that you did big ticket reforms, but most of them got backloaded when you had things like the insolvency code, the goods and services tax, and the Aadhaar subsidy reforms and other things actually started kicking in only towards the second half. The big factor market reforms didn't get done. But I think this government has been very cohesive, and that is good. But now the reforms that still need to be done, and also the social assurances that need, so that all of the people of India feel included, I think that messaging needs to go out strongly. And I hope that the Prime Minister also speaks out more often on these subjects than he did in his first term. But I think we cannot also forget that there are actually important social divisions that cannot be just papered over by somebody making statements. I think at the social level, I think we need communities to be able to reach a dialogue and understand one another, so that you can sort out differences. And for the BJP, it cannot become an inclusive party by becoming another Congress. I mean, the Congress did not do anything for the Muslims but claimed the secular tag. So what is the point in having a secular party like this that actually doesn't deliver to anybody? So just because you offer a protection racket to the minorities, do you think you are a secular party? No, I think in terms of real benefits, I think Modi has done as much. Only in terms of political messaging, because his base is more of Hindu orientation. I think his talk is different from what is actually does as a government. I think that is where he needs to bridge the gap. I think what he does is quite inclusive, but what he says may not be that inclusive. That is where I think the gap remains as far as Mr. Modi is concerned. His party is a Hindu party by and large. It cannot suddenly start including minorities without losing its base. So that shift has to take some time.
No, but for example, in West Bengal, a lot of TMC leaders who have, or some TMC leaders who were inducted a couple of days ago, were from minority communities. But I get your point, Professor Ayub. Like, let's see what Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi does, or who becomes the minority affairs minister, for example. So good points there. But let me come to the bigger picture and the challenges here and the kind of governance we will see. Swami, the question has been repeated so many times this evening that I know it seems, stale by now, but really it is the biggest one, that who will be the finance minister, and if it is Mr. Amit Shah, will he fulfill the expectations and the very high expectations that India's finance minister has at this point? If not him, who could be the others coming into the fray?
First, just on the social harmony issue, the BJP has so far held back on some of its long-standing demands. This includes abolition of Article 370 regarding Kashmir. It's about the universal civil code. The question is, now that Mr. Modi has this large mandate, will he not follow up these particular long-standing demands of the BJP? And if he does that, what happens to this business of inclusiveness or Sabke Vishwas? I mean, it seems to me there's a direct contradiction between those two. I'm not sure where it's going to end up. But if he is going to try and say, well, let me gain the confidence of the minorities, it cannot be done by pushing the BJP's traditional agenda. And yet, surely the RSS will say, come on now, we have this large majority, we must go ahead with this. So I see some major problems out there, and between the two, which will give way? Will it be Sabke Vishwas or will it be the RSS program? I'm afraid, it seems to me, the Sabke Vishwas is more likely to give way than the RSS program. Okay, so that leads to a certain amount of gloom. Finance. It's an important issue, and I didn't realize, as Jaggi just said, that Amit Shah has experience in this thing. He has turned around a cooperative bank. It's a useful thing. We don't know who's going to be finance minister. I think it might yet be Mr. Gadkari, who again has been in business, who understands that business. I think that the finance ministry is not going to be doing anything radical. I remember Arun Jaitley's first budget. He said we shall corporatize the railways, we will corporatize the port trusts. Nothing happened.
No, but can the finance ministry
so even
right
what
now...
was promised...
No, that's a very key point, and I just want to take that forward if you allow me. Can the finance minister right now afford not to do anything radical? And let me get Yamini Iyer on that very quickly. Because the incrementalism that we kind of saw in term one, at least in the first few months, is not something that India perhaps can afford to do right now. 2019 is not 2014 as far as the economy and the global economy is concerned.
No, absolutely. I think that there's no question that we need something radical. Whether we have the stomach for it, whether we have the vision for it, whether frankly we know we are actually, our economy is locked into a fairly deep set of structural challenges that require a fair amount of radical shifts, for which I don't think we really have any clear answers. We have broad brush strokes. We talk about factor market reforms, we talk about the need for liberalization 2.0, but we are an economy that has been functioning very much as many economists have been saying, lending itself towards getting towards a middle income trap, and we are hitting into that middle income trap partly because of crony capital, capital, partly because of deep structural inequality, and partly because we haven't been able to figure out how we can get out of some of these deep structural constraints. So we need radical reforms. I don't think we as yet have the vision for it, and I don't know yet whether this government can do so. It certainly has the mandate to do so. Let me just say two other things. One of the things we've been hearing a lot from even Modi 1.0 was that administrative reforms is going to be the key towards them achieving many of the goals that they have set out for themselves. And the reason why they didn't do much radical administrative reform in Modi 1.0 is because they were still on a learning agenda. That this is going to be the government that you're going to see some significant administrative reforms. India, as Prime Minister Modi has said in the past, is a 19th century administration trying to deal with 21st century problems. He really actually encapsulates the challenge. But if you look at the first thing, 58 ministers in a central government, it's always been overloaded on the top, India's federal system. It needs to be far more leaner, far more agile,
but
far more
Yamini,
capable of interministerial coordination for the kind of challenges we face. We're not headed there at all.
Yeah, just the counter argument would be there were 70 in 2014 and they can have 81 technically.
I think that with a mandate like this, you should be working towards a much... Prime Minister Modi at this point doesn't need to have... It doesn't, as you've said yourself, doesn't really need to please too many people. He can have the government he wants. And there is, I think, no question that India, the government of India, the central government, is just far too heavy, far too invasive, and ends up poking itself in business of the state, which inevitably creates a lot of center-state tension. And the future of India, it just has to be much more federal. So a large, clunky central government will prevent it from being agile and flexible, will make interagency cooperation much harder, and will ensure that the central government continues to be doing things that it really ought not to do.
Sadanand, you want to come in on that very key point, that how will this government actually perform and this Council of Ministers actually perform?
Well, I mean, on a lighter note, I'd like to sort of remind Yamini that most of these ministers don't do anything anyway. So that's sort of one thing that...
You make a good point. I would say close down the ministries, but hey.
Make us worry a little bit less. But, coming back to the idea of, finance being absolutely central, I mean, I think the big question that none of us has an answer to is, are we still expected to push for and expect the traditional reform agenda, which many of us have been talking about for close to 2 decades, right? Liberalization of sector markets and so on. Or has India, in fact, entered an entirely different era? And do we need to start thinking of reform in a different way, thinking of it limited by the political constraints that seem to have shown themselves over the first term of Modi and 2 terms of UPA? And, many of us who have been talking about this for a long time, we're kind of locked into one way of thinking about it. I happen to think that's the right way of thinking about it. But when you're looking at India's trajectory, it's not clear to me what the BJP believes. Do they look at Modi 1.0 as preparation to finally go through with those reforms in Modi 2.0? Or are they quite happy with Modi 1.0's way of doing it? I mean, if you look at it in political terms, doing these little welfare schemes on the side and kind of staying away from anything controversial, right? Except for GST and Nutty Demon, they stayed away from privatization. They stayed away from any serious labor reform. They took a stab at land, but then they stepped back, and that ended up paying off for them at the hustings. So the question really that, I mean, I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone has an answer is, do they take that as affirmation that the cautious approach works? Or do they look at some of these sort of alarm bells, look at some of the economic signals and say, well, it worked for the first 5 years. It won't work for the second 5 years. So we really have to start doing something now.
Yeah. Jaggi, the official stance so far has been that we are pretty much on the reforms track. Hasn't it? There has been no reimagining, at least in their messaging, that they're going to change anything drastically or move more towards welfareism. If you just look at the manifesto, where they want too many new ideas, but it's more about delivery and last mile delivery of existing schemes rather than trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think we misunderstood Modi when he said minimum government, maximum governance, because his idea is about making government or public sector more efficient and making it less and more friction free in its interaction with business and say the common man. It is not about actually shrinking the size of government. Mr. Modi believes in a big state because he believes only the state can deliver basic goods for the, and for that reason he has moved his party to the center left from the assumed position of center right. So that's what he did in his first term. In the second term, I think he is also a reformer in some ways. Like I think for the first time you actually are taking a shot at removing cronyism with the IBC code, and you also have the goods and services tax, which is pushing people from informality to formality. So all these are necessary transitions before you truly have a modern and tax compliant economy. So the question is, the big 3 or 4 reforms that needed to be done have all been put into the second term, if at all he go into attend them. These are of course labor and land market reforms. He's barely had a nibble at them. For example, in the last 2 budget, fixed term labor contracts have been allowed for all industries. Now, so that's incrementally a reform, but it has not fundamentally changed the labor laws and other things to make it easier for people to hire more people. The Apprentices Act has been changed, but it is still not the kind in which the way in which it works in Germany. So it's people are still nibbling at that labor reform. Land reform is given up because Mr. Gadkari has found a way around it by changing the alignments of highways and all. He's managed to get cheaper land by not going in the direct route but surround the costly land centers. So, but you still need to do that. Agriculture is the biggest area where no reform has been done, and people are still worried about that. If he fixes these 3 markets, agriculture, land and labor, I think that if he can do it in the first 6 months, he can get it done. Otherwise, you're back into the election cycle and nothing else is going to get done.
No, the election cycle is coming, closer.
Mr. Modi does not believe in privatization much. He believes, he does not believe in nationalization, but 2-3 things that he is going to privatize. I clearly asked him once and he said he is definitely going to privatize Air India and the other loss-making units. Second thing, he will privatize some key airports.
Hey, he has to find someone to buy Air India. While you know something like Jet is also on the block, but yeah, you have to find buyers first. But yeah, a lot of you know challenges up ahead. This team of 58 has its task cut out for it, and of course here at ET Now we will be tracking them every step of the way. I want to thank this amazing panel for joining us on this special show this evening, as also all of our viewers for staying on with us right here at ET Now.